Hello, I'm Maria Titizian.
And I'm Rubina Margosian, and this is the Week in Review.
Every week, we bring you the stories shaping Armenia and the region.
From politics and policy to social issues and conflict, we break down the news and what it means for you.
This week in the news, the full text of the 3 MOUs signed between Pashinyan and Trump are released. Armenia and the UK agreed to elevate their relationship to a strategic partnership. And Pakistan, which has refused to recognize Armenia, is now in talks with the Armenian Foreign Ministry about possibly establishing diplomatic relations. Tune into our weekly roundup of the news with me, Maria Titizian, and Rubina Margosian.
Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's office has released the full text of 3 memoranda of understanding signed with the U.S. President Donald Trump on August 8. The first MOU covers the crossroads of peace capacity-building partnership, reaffirming support for Armenia's sovereignty and borders and promoting Armenia as a regional trade hub. It outlines cooperation on infrastructure, border security, cybersecurity, private investment, and exchanges between U.S. and Armenian security agencies. The second MOU focuses on AI and semiconductor innovation, aiming to strengthen Armenia's semiconductor ecosystem, support artificial intelligence applications, and elevate its status within the U.S. export control framework. The agreement encourages private investment, joint projects, research partnerships, and workforce development in AI and semiconductors. The third MOU addresses energy security, aiming to improve Armenia's energy resilience, align regulations with international standards, and support a transition to a low-carbon, competitive energy system. Initiatives include civil nuclear cooperation, battery energy storage for renewables, cross-border energy trade, cybersecurity for energy infrastructure, and workforce capacity building.
Well, speaking of these MOUs, this week Prime Minister Pashinyan addressed the TRIP Road. This is the Trump Road for International Peace and Prosperity, noting that there have been no substantive talks since the Washington Accords. The trilateral declaration itself, he stressed, is just a 7-point statement built on 5 principles: territorial integrity, sovereignty, legitimacy, inviolability of borders, and reciprocity, and anything within that framework is open to discussion. Pashinyan expects substantive talks with both Washington and Baku to begin in September. And this week, in his address marking the 35th anniversary of Armenia's Declaration of Independence, Pashinyan said the document reflected the mindset of the late Soviet political elite, shaped by the Karabakh movement, and it linked Armenia's independence to conflict. That framework, he argued, made sovereignty, or rather true sovereignty, impossible. A country trapped in conflict cannot be independent. He also said that until September 2020, his government avoided concessions that theoretically might have prevented, the 44-day war, because they would have deepened Armenia's vulnerabilities. Instead, again, he argued, his government forged a new path, one that has made peace with Azerbaijan possible, dialogue with Turkey has begun, ties with Georgia and Iran have deepened, and a path that has allowed Armenia to position itself as a credible global partner.
Meanwhile, President Ilham Aliyev said again that the peace deal hasn't been signed because Armenia still needs to amend its constitution and remove the references to the Declaration of Independence and its call for unification with Nagorno-Karabakh. Once the amendments are made and territorial claims are removed, he said, the treaty can move forward. Aliyev also pointed to the Zangezur corridor, the so-called Zangezur corridor, as a chance for Armenia to profit as a transit country by collecting transit fees. And he means trip.
Right. And of course he's using the language
that is problematic. Beyond east-west trade, he said, it could serve as a north-south link, Russia to Azerbaijan, to Armenia and Nakhichevan, into Iran. In his words, a win-win for the whole region.
Yeah, he just has to stop calling it the Zangezur corridor. Well, Armenia is holding its annual conference of heads of diplomatic missions. These are Armenian ambassadors serving abroad. And this annual conference, was held in Gapan, Syunik this year. The conference focuses on organizing Armenia's diplomatic service, setting foreign policy priorities, and building partnerships. Diplomats and MFA officials toured new infrastructure projects in Syunik, including a tunnel and bridges on the Akarak-Kacharan road, and observed checkpoint expansion at the Armenia Armenia-Iran border, where a second bridge is under construction. Previous gatherings were held in Artsakh back in 2019 and Jermug in 2022 after Azerbaijan had attacked sovereign Armenia. So I think this was, in a way, a symbolic meeting taking place in Sunik.
And they flew to Rapan, which was also interesting to use the airport.
Because you keep wanting to fly. One of these days we're going to take a plane to Rapan, you and me.
I'm definitely flying. The schedule is on the Zvartnots airport site.
Okay, indeed.
Well, Armenia and the UK, in the second round of their strategic dialogue that took place in Yerevan, agreed to elevate ties to a strategic partnership. Discussions focused on security and defense cooperation, including high-level visits, exchange of defense attachés, cybersecurity, and countering hybrid threats. Both sides highlighted boosting trade, investment, and reform efforts with international financial institutions. With this agreement, the UK joins Armenia's growing list of strategic partners alongside the US, Georgia, and the Netherlands, with similar deals in progress with France and Iran.
And something that we've been hearing about, talking about,
Just discussing.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sparked controversy this week, speaking on the Patrick Bet David podcast, saying he personally recognizes the Armenian genocide. And it was, he said it so casually anyway, and wrongly claiming that Israel's parliament had already done so. Though the Knesset has indeed discussed the recognition of the Armenian genocide several times, it has repeatedly failed to recognize it, most recently in 2018. And of course, Ankara condemned Netanyahu of exploiting historical tragedies for political purposes and deflecting attention from Israel's own actions in Gaza, where a genocide is unfolding in real time. That was my comment, sorry. Previously, Netanyahu had accused President Erdogan of hypocrisy, citing Turkey's denial of the Armenian genocide and the treatment of Kurds, dissidents, and journalists. Prime Minister Pashinyan responded to all of this, cautioning against letting recognition or non-recognition become a geopolitical small change, noting that in many cases such gestures are driven by votes rather than historical truth. And whenever Israel has an issue with Turkey, they pull the genocide card. They have yet to formally recognize the Armenian genocide. And I was watching that interview, that podcast, and the podcaster is saying, well, what about, the Assyrian genocide, the Greek genocide, and the Armenian genocide? And he was like, it was so casual. Yeah, I recognize it.
In our archives, we have a beautiful article about the politicization of genocide recognition. I don't remember the title, but
it was called The Armenian Genocide Between Diplomatic Pragmatism and Moral Obligation. This was by Hovannes Nazaretian, and it was just on this past April 24 that we published this piece. And definitely something to read for our readers,
Well, in other news, Pashinyan dismissed Libarit Dermeyan, the head of the Office of the Representative of International Legal Matters in Armenia. The move came after the Prime Minister stated during a weekly briefing that any official opposing the government's decision to not abide by an emergency ruling of the Stockholm Arbitration Tribunal should resign. The tribunal had issued an interim ruling saying Armenia should hold the enforcement of new laws targeting the electric networks of Armenia and warned that state actions cast doubt on Armenia's treaty obligations with Cyprus. The government, however, argued that the ruling addresses a different set of issues and emphasized that enforcement of the interim ruling must align with Armenia's laws and international agreements first. Earlier this month, Armenia hired international law firm Arnold & Porter to represent the country in the ongoing dispute with businessman Samvel Garabetian, who is a majority share owner of the electric networks of Armenia and is currently
in pretrial detention. All right. And I just know that electricity at my house is cut again today. I think we're all tired of these electrical.
This year it's much better though. Last year,
do you remember last year?
Yeah, it was really
electricity. Bad. Yeah. At the same briefing, Pashinyan sharply criticized former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State James O'Brien for remarks he made, or in an article, downplaying the Armenia-Azerbaijan the Washington Accords, as it were, that were signed on August 8. In an August 14 article, O'Brien argued the deal offered Armenia no real peace dividend, no open border with Turkey, no major investments, which is really, anyway, only a corridor for Azerbaijan. He also warned that Armenia's 2026 elections could be shaped by a coerced constitutional change, deeply unpopular and damaging for Pashinyan. Well, the prime minister countered that Armenia was really the most vulnerable under the Biden administration, criticizing Washington's limited support. He dismissed O'Brien's comments as emotional assessments, saying the former official was trying to explain why Trump's team succeeded where his had failed.
I just wonder why O'Brien would be emotional about about these matters. Well, in other news, there's been a round of high-level reshuffling. Lilit Makuntz is returning from her role as Armenia's ambassador to the United States to become the Prime Minister's chief advisor. Stepping into her place in Washington will be Narek Mkirtchian, who just last week was dismissed as Minister of Labor and Social Affairs. The post, in turn, has been taken over by Arsen Torosyan, most recently parliament member, but former health minister.
And in a very interesting, perhaps unprecedented move, the foreign ministers of Armenia and Pakistan held a phone call this week. Ararat Mirzoyan and Ishak Dar agreed to explore the possibility of establishing diplomatic relations. Pakistan, which has very close ties with Azerbaijan, has so far refused to recognize Armenia as a sovereign state. This goes back to, when Armenia became independent. Saudi Arabia was the other large country or state that had never recognized Armenia, and that changed. It was last year, I believe, or was it this year? I can't recall. Or very recently. And so Pakistan, it's interesting to see how that's going to play out.
And the Armenian government has announced it will pay off the mortgages of more than 80 Artsakh families who lost loved ones in the war and purchased homes here in Armenia. Back in 2022, Artsakh's government had issued certificates worth 20 to 22 million drams, about $52,000 to $57,000, to help these families repay their loans. But after Artsakh's dissolution, the payment stopped, leaving families with heavy debts. Now Yerevan will resume those payments starting September of this year and continue until the mortgages are fully settled. Families with members who are not Armenian citizens will receive support once citizenship is granted.
And the International Committee of the Red Cross will close its Baku office officially on September 3. That's in a few days. And this comes at Azerbaijan's request. We've spoken about this in the past. Daphne Marin, head of the ICRC delegation in Armenia, emphasized that the organization will continue working as a neutral intermediary, especially on the issue of missing persons, and will maintain engagement with Azerbaijani authorities. I'm not sure how they're going to be able to do this without a representation there, but hopefully members of the ICRC will be able to fly in, because we do have, of course, prisoners of war and detainees in Baku. And, the concern was the ICRC was the only neutral sort of intermediary who could go and visit them. So we'll see how that's going to...
And only organization through which we heard news regarding the detainees and POWs. Yes.
And as always, we're going to be talking about the articles that we published this week. Just today, we published a piece by Sosi Tatikian. It's called The Unfinished Peace Deal, Armenia-Azerbaijan Agreement, Initialed Yet Unsigned. So last week, she wrote about one component of this whole peace deal, if you will, which was focused on TRIP, the Trump Road for International Peace and Prosperity. This week, she looks at the other components of the deal, the dissolution of the OSCE Minsk Group, whatever. And she writes that while the deal advances hopes for normalization, the ambiguities and omissions leave potential settlement fragile, contested, and vulnerable to instability. There's no talk about the right of return, what's going to happen with the Artsakh Armenians. So anyway, again, very long article, very complex, but it sort of lays out the whole thing. So that's what we published today.
And we've had an interesting piece by George Meneshan, a first-time contributor. It's called Armenia-Azerbaijan and Constitutional Amendments, Lessons from the Prespa Agreement. He talks about Baku's push for changes in Armenia's constitution, which we reported on today as well, and we do every week, and how it's been linked to the Prespa Agreement, but the comparison is not fair, he says. Prespa resolves symbolic disagreements, while Armenia confronts existential threats. these forced amendments risk undermining both legal norms and political stability in the country.
Yeah, it was about Greece and Macedonia, so it was an interesting look at the issue. We published a column by Maria Gunko. It's called To Love Armenia, and I think this is one of, I mean, I don't know, maybe for me it was, but it was one of her best columns. And we all know that she's a Russian emigre who's living in Armenia. Her children go to Armenian school. They speak Armenian. They're little Russian kids speaking Armenian. And she asks, the question she asks is, what does it mean to love a land? So she kind of takes the reader on this journey into Armenia, where mountains breathe history, rivers carry memory. And so while she's tracing Armenia's landscapes and contradictions, she often, she talks about how affection endures when beauty, uneasy history, complex geopolitics collide. It was just a really beautiful piece. I really enjoyed
it. It was also very insightful for Armenians to read, because we go through the same emotions, right? Sometimes we're angry at the situations, at developments. We're angry at treatment here sometimes from people, or the way people treat each other. It really goes a long way, this piece. And also just for diasporans in general, because we have gone through the same emotions. For me, it was Lebanon, and I do love Lebanon as much as I love Armenia. And granted, I was a child growing up there, but it's also the difficulties that make you attached to a country.
That's right, yeah.
Well, we have a piece by Sandra Sadek. This, speaking of Lebanon, she's Lebanese from America. Europe's new Black Sea strategy. What's in it for Armenia? The EU's new Black Sea strategy promises deeper security and connectivity in the region, but what does it mean for landlocked Armenia, caught between Russia and the West, seeking stability, resilience, and a stronger place in Europe's shifting geopolitical order? As Armenians say, kaprenk this thing, we'll see.
Yeah, and just before we dive into SALT, we also published a podcast, EVN Talks, this week. It was about the Genocide Education Project. I spoke with Roxanne Makasjian. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Genocide Education Project, or GenEd. It was a really inspiring, I want to say, podcast, because it's about taking a problem and seeing how can we fix this problem, right? So we talked about how American educators approach the Armenian genocide and human rights in the classroom. She talked about their teacher fellowship program. So they bring 15, 20 American teachers every year to Armenia, and they get to have this immersive experience. And they engage directly with the history and memory of genocide, and then they go back, and part of the program is then they have to help another cohort of teachers to know how to teach about Armenian genocide. So anyway, it was a really inspiring podcast, so I hope people listen to it.
And kind of, I just realizing this little bit ties up with Kungo's piece, because we launched our August issue of SALT, which is our lifestyle magazine, and we titled it Rhythms this time, because there's several articles about music and rhythms. But one of the articles that we published first in this issue is called Armenia and the Diaspora, a Situationship, by Datev Hovanesyan. And she says, Armenia and its diaspora share a bond of love, pride, and pain, full of longing, misunderstandings, and unspoken truths. The author explores this complicated situationship where memory and survival meet politics, and where distance both deepens and strains connection. And also she kind of compares it to dating, to a relationship, a complicated relationship.
Ghosting, breadcrumbing, some terms I hadn't heard before. I really loved this piece. I thought it was humorous and smart and, kind of tongue-in-cheek at some points, but also looking at really deep issues. And it's had a great response so far. Yeah,
yes, it has.
Yeah. Well, another piece, Jenny on our blog, what the Latina diva triggered in our Armenian hearts. And yeah, of course, we're hysterical about everything. I say this every week. But, the whole J-Lo concert and how people reacted to it. She brought a lot of conversation. Women were just annoyed because some people were saying, look she's 58 years old. How come Armenian women don't look like that? And all of these crazy...
Some of us do.
You're not 59, so yeah, don't even go there, Roop. So she talks about the J-Lo effect and how it revealed our society's contrasts and ignited debates about culture and trust, but at the same time hinted at Armenia's potential as a stage for the world, and how if there was proper communication with the people to explain, look, yes, the government is spending $6 million on bringing her here, but we have to look at the long-term effect of this. So it was looking at it from all different angles. A really cool piece by Ella Kanakari.
We just want to listen to Super Sako all the time. And Tata and anything international shouldn't be available. Yeah. And since it's wedding season and everyone I know is going to weddings all the time, and we have so many visitors, we did do a piece about Armenian weddings. It's called Armenian Wedding Edition, Green and Red to White. It's basically Maria Tumanian, the author, is looking into traditions and rituals, Armenian wedding rituals and traditions, and what we've taken, what we've kept, how we've changed it, and to what extent do we understand the symbolism behind the lavash on the shoulder, behind the green and red, what the traditional Armenian wedding garment was like. A little bit of that.
Yeah, it's a very cool story. And a longer piece, it's called The Raw Voices of Armenia's Underground Music Scene. Arlit Markarian talks to 4 Armenian underground artists from psychedelic rock to post-punk and beyond. So they're kind of reshaping the soundscapes with a lot of raw, honesty, intimate stories and bold experimentations. Some of them I was thing about Lilith. I mean, I wasn't sure about their music, but I mean, that's fine. It's all about
we
taste.
should tell everyone that Lilith is producing the podcast. She's sitting here and recording us right now, and we can give editorial notes to her. Yes, it was too long, Lilith. Even though our artists were fascinating, and if I'm correct, I understood she's basically, look at us talk about her in her presence.
Yeah, that's good. Saying it to her
but
face.
It's basically a call, that's how I understood it, to support Armenian musicians and listen to some of the Armenian music that's being created alongside us now today in Armenia. Yeah. And it's very nice. It's very inspiring. It's very interesting.
I didn't
and we
say
should
it
start
wasn't.
following this artist because they're all young, mostly, and talented, and there's good Armenian music out there.
And as Lily said, Beyonce didn't return her call, so she was forced to talk to Armenian artists. So there you go. And if you're still listening to this podcast, I do want to talk about very quickly about this really cool thing that we've pulled together miraculously from Yerevan. We are bringing EVN Talks to the United States from September 22 to 26. We're going to be at UC Berkeley, at Stanford University in San Francisco. This will be on September 22. We did a save the date, but we're going to be giving more information in the coming days. In New York City on September 24 at the AGBU Hall, and in Boston we will be at MIT. There will be panels featuring, some of our writers and board member actually, and we're going to be talking about, small state strategic breakthroughs in what's happening in Armenia after the Washington Accords. So look for those panels in your city if you're around. We'd love to see you in person. And that's the kind of week we've had here in Armenia. Thank you for listening. Have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we will be back again next week.